Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 Honor Mode guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we are covering my pick for the 20 best items in Baldur's Gate 3 in Act 1. Over the last several months, I've gone through and rated every single equippable item in Baldur's Gate 3 in tier lists, and talked about every item in the game, which has yielded dozens of hours of video in extensive detail. So I wanted to gather the 20 best items in the game together, so that when you're looking to equip an Honor Mode party, you have one place that you can look for the very best items in the game. Act 1 is the most important act to get your equipment right in, because it's where most Honor Mode runs are won or lost, and it's also where items have the largest bonuses relative to the power level of your character, so these are the most important items in the game. In this tier list, we're specifically going to be looking at equippable items, not consumables or weapons, which I'll cover in a future series later on. So just gear that you actually equip on your character. And we will be covering the 20 best items, which characters they are good for, and why you would want to use them, and what makes them so powerful. Now, as you know, the important thing about a joke is that it's funnier the more times you tell it. So the inspiration for this video is that people have been really enjoying my item tier lists and guides, and so if I collect all of the best items in one place to teach them which are the very best items in the game, then I think I've made a terrible mistake. Well, probably too late to stop now. Let's rate some items. Before I start rating the items, I think it's important to take a moment to talk about what we actually mean when we say best. There's a lot of different definitions that we could use for best in this context. The items with the biggest numbers, the items that go on the most different builds, the items that are the prettiest. So it's important that we look at what definition we're using when I'm ranking these items. In this case, the definition that I'm going with for best item is the item that has the most impact on your chances of winning the games, the items that are easiest to win Honor Mode with. That means a few things for the items that are going to show up high on the list. Firstly, the items that are most powerful are of course going to show up very high on the list. Raw stats do matter, and so the items with the highest numbers and largest impact when you actually equip them are going to show up very high on the list because they impact your chances of winning the most. Secondly, though, items that show up earlier in the act are more likely to impact an important and difficult fight. So they're even more important to pay attention to than items that show up later in the act, because they impact a larger percentage of your playthrough, so they're more likely to make the difference between victory and defeat. That means this list will prioritize some items that show up early in the act, because they're going to be the most important items to pay attention to for your Honor Mode playthrough. Finally, I will be considering items that are versatile and go on a lot of different builds, because one of the great things about items is they let you take a lot of different builds and still have them be powerful, because a lot of the stats can come from items, even if you're playing a less optimal build or a different playstyle. So items that are powerful, versatile, and impact a large percentage of your playstyle are the ones that are going to rank highest on this list. Finally, before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Fusako for the $5 donation, Derek Wilch for the $20, Cunning Linguist for the $15, and Emir Emiroglu, Gonzalo Mena Fuenzalida, and Sloth for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support. It really does mean a lot. Alright, let's rate some items. We're going to start with a quick honorable mention. This item, the +1 Breastplate, doesn't have the power level to crack the top 20, but it's one I wanted to talk about anyways, because it's really important to know about when you're plotting your Act 1 runs, because it's a huge power boost that's available quite early. The +1 Breastplate is a 15 AC medium armor with a maximum dex mod of +2, and there's one that you can steal in the Druid Grove right next to Damon, so you can acquire it before you've engaged in any real combats, and have it available for your party. 15 armor class is equal to the Githyanki half-plate that Lae'zel starts with, and so if you add the +1 Breastplate to your party, you can have 2 characters with 17 base AC, 15 from their armor class, plus 2 from their dexterity modifier, up to 19 if you equip them with shields. Most early game enemies cannot reliably hit 19 armor class, so being able to get a second 15 AC medium armor right away makes your party much more consistent and reliable for early game fights. So stealing the +1 Breastplate is something that I highly recommend when you are engaging in an honor mode run. And so while this item isn't going to stay on your party sort of long term throughout Act 1, so it's not powerful enough to crack the top 20, it's definitely one that's important to know about, so I wanted to mention it. It's good for, obviously, the early game, because you're going to wear it in order to boost your early game armor class, and that will just make your party much more reliable and harder to kill. And weighing in at number 20, the Ring of Protection. The Ring of Protection is a ring. It's available very early in the act, and it gives you a +1 to your armor class and a +1 to your saving throws. This is going to stay relevant throughout the entire game. Increases to your armor class and saving throws in the ring slot are something that pretty much any character can benefit from. And so the Ring of Protection is going to make an excellent addition to literally any character that doesn't have a ring that they would rather wear. It increases the consistency and reliability of your party dramatically, because increases to your armor class make them harder to kill, increases to your saving throws make them both harder to kill and harder to remove from combats in other ways. And so any party member that's at risk of having problems, the Ring of Protection can solve those problems. The Ring of Protection is going to stay on your character throughout Act 1, and it's very likely for most parties that you'll keep this ring equipped throughout Act 2, and quite possibly on into the endgame if you don't have specific rings that you are looking to use for those character builds, because this is just a really solid set of bonuses that any character can make use of. The Ring of Protection is especially good for, I know this looks a little silly, but it's especially good for characters with significantly low AC, because you can use it to bring up the average armor class of your party. Enemies in Baldur's Gate will typically target characters that have the lowest AC, so you want to increase the armor class of the weakest party member, and the Ring of Protection helps you do that. Or characters with really high AC, because then you can get them to the breakpoint where enemies cannot easily hit them at all if their armor class gets high enough. It's also just good for any character that doesn't need another ring, and so the Ring of Protection is going to be a mainstay for every party. Coming in at number 19, the Haste Helm. The Haste Helm gives you 3 turns of momentum when you start combat. Momentum is an effect that gives you an additional 5 feet of movement speed for every turn of momentum remaining. Also, I want everyone to be impressed that I took screenshots from the wiki for this slideshow, so, the people who really wanted to see the item descriptions up, this one's for you. The Haste Helm is so valuable because mobility in Baldur's Gate is incredibly important. Being able to get next to an enemy as a melee character is critical. If your melee character can't attack, they've effectively been stunned for a round. And so if you don't have the movement speed to reach the enemy that you want to attack, you're just wasting your entire turn. Dungeons & Dragons is a game about taking more actions than your opponent. You want to take relevant actions, and you want your opponents to not take relevant actions. So the Haste Helm makes it much more likely that we're going to be able to do our thing, because we'll get next to the enemy that we want to attack. It's especially good for melee characters, of course, because it lets them act at all. A melee character who starts out of movement range of an enemy does nothing, but it's also good for other characters that are positioning dependent, which can include ranged characters, characters that specifically want to be on high ground to make ranged attacks, characters that are kiting enemies backwards by outmaneuvering them with higher movement speed and killing them with ranged attacks, or reducing their move speed with Rays of Frost. So the Haste Helm is another item that is just really powerful on any build, though specifically important for melee builds and characters that want to get into close range with vulnerable enemies will benefit immensely from the Haste Helm. It makes your party much more reliable when your melee characters can actually attack, so the Haste Helm is very useful for that. And number 18, the Ring of Flinging. The Ring of Flinging does an additional 1d4 damage whenever you throw an object or weapon. Now, in Baldur's Gate 3, throwing is an incredibly broken strategy. The Tavern Brawler feat lets throwing be one of the most powerful things that you can do in the game. Characters that throw their weapons are some of the very best builds for Honor Mode, because of the sheer amount of damage and accuracy that you can add to your attacks. The Ring of Flinging multiplies that even further, because it gives you a damage bonus to your thrown weapons, and so it makes one of the most powerful strategies even more powerful. The Ring of Flinging is also a little bit broken in difficulties below Honor Mode, where it's going to add your Tavern Brawler bonus multiple times because of damage rider source bugs. But in Honor Mode, it's still an additional d4 bonus to your throw damage that gets multiplied by 2 if you score a critical hit. And the amount of additional damage that you get from throwing characters, which often make a lot of attacks in a round, is going to be immense. Even small amounts of damage like this, when added to every single attack of a very reliable character, add up to tons of damage over the course of a playthrough, and many fewer turns that your enemies get to take, because they're now dead. So the Ring of Flinging is immensely powerful for throwers. I've ranked it a little on the lower end because it only works for one single specific type of character, but for that character, obviously, it's best in slot, and will stay on them throughout the entire game. Coming in at number 17, the Broodmother's Revenge. The Broodmother's Revenge is an amulet that gives you, whenever you are healed, you gain a weapon coating on your weapons that deals an extra 1d6 poison damage. 1d6 is the highest per attack damage bonus that you can get in Act 1. It's a huge amount of additional damage, and it's massively powerful for any character that's making weapon attacks. The condition of having to be healed is pretty easy to fulfill, even without spending actions. Later on in the game, you'll be able to trigger this automatically with the Poison Synergy items or the Ring of Regeneration, but in Act 1, you can trigger it pretty easily without spending a full action, just by, as a bonus action, drinking a potion, by having a character cast Healing Word on you, or various other ways to trigger this effect. You can use specific weapons to trigger it as well. 1d6 poison damage is a massive amount of additional damage, and so any character that's making weapon attacks, especially if they don't have a significant use for their bonus action, so they can use potions to trigger this in combat, or you can just heal before combat starts to get the weapon coating. It lasts for a couple turns, so you can trigger it, then start combat and do the poison damage with the Broodmother's Revenge immediately. Will increase your damage output massively. This does require some action economy, so it's not as powerful, I think, as the ones that just provide the bonuses passively all the time, and it conflicts with other weapon coatings, including just dipping your weapon in a candle. So while it is a significant upgrade to your damage output, it's not as huge an upgrade as some other increases to your damage. But damage increases are amazing, especially in Act 1, where they're often the difference between killing an enemy in one turn and requiring 2 turns to take them out, so the Broodmother's Revenge is a massive bonus to any character that makes weapon attacks, which is most characters in Dungeons & Dragons. Weighing in at number 16, the Adamantine Scale Armor. The Adamantine Scale Armor is another medium armor that gives you 16 base armor class with a max dexterity bonus of +2. So it's the highest AC medium armor that you can get in Act 1, so it's going to give you the most armor class for a medium armor character, and in fact, will be tied with heavy armor characters for the most armor class that you can get, because it gives you a dexterity bonus. So characters wearing this will have the highest armor class available in Act 1. It also reduces all incoming damage by 1, and when you get hit by a melee attack, enemies get 2 turns of reeling, which reduces their attack rolls by 1 for each turn remaining, and you cannot be critically hit. So this all-in-one package gives you a ton of defensive bonuses, very high armor class, damage reduction. Enemies that do manage to land a hit on you will not be able to land subsequent hits because they'll receive the reeling effect, which will reduce their effectiveness at trying to hit you, and you become immune to critical hits. Immunity to critical hits is really, really important in Honor Mode. It's easy to overlook just how powerful this is. Critical hits seem like they're not going to be that big a deal, because enemies only get them 1 in 20 times, and they double the damage. So it's basically, immunity to critical hits provides a 5% reduction to the average damage that enemies are doing, which doesn't sound like much. But it provides all of that damage reduction in the same turn. It removes spikes and variants. Something that I say a lot when talking about character optimization is that the enemy of optimization is randomness. Immunity to critical hits removes a huge element of randomness from fights. Enemies who can't critically hit you can't provide large damage spikes that you weren't expecting, potentially dropping a character to 0 hit points, forcing other characters to spend actions recovering them or healing them, or in a prioritizing a different enemy than you intended to, and snowballing the fight out of control. A lot of honor mode runs end when a random critical hit, or 2 or 3 in a row, cause you to take huge spikes of unexpected damage, and put you in a much worse position than you were expecting to be at the beginning of your next turn. Immunity to critical hits removes that randomness from the equation, and so not only does it reduce incoming damage, it also makes planning the amount of damage that you're taking wildly easier, which makes every strategic decision you make in the game much, much better. So the Adamantine Scale just removes a huge element of problems that your party can have by removing critical hit chance. It's good for every single character that wants to equip medium armor in Act 1, because it's the best medium armor available in Act 1, and for relatively low dexterity characters throughout the game. Other medium armor users will get the medium armors that allow you to use your full dexterity modifier, but a character like a cleric or something, or a barbarian, will not necessarily have super high dexterity, so the Adamantine Scale is going to be excellent. It's particularly good for barbarians, because they're going to be in the front line, and enemies will attack them with advantage a lot due to reckless attack, so you're more likely to be critically hit. The Adamantine Scale removes that downside for barbarians, and that makes it the best in slot armor for barbarians through a big chunk of the game. So this item is huge for any party running a barbarian, but also just any party with a medium armor user, which is almost every party, is going to benefit massively from the Adamantine Scale. At number 15, the Adamantine Splint. This is the heavy armor version of the Adamantine Scale armor, so it gives you 18 base armor class, but no dexterity bonus, so a character wearing it will have the same armor class that they will wearing the medium armor, but it gives you 3 turns of reeling and reduces incoming damage by 2. I have put it just above the medium armor version, because all of the things that the medium armor version gets apply to the heavy armor version, of course, except that characters without heavy armor proficiency can't use it. But there's just fewer good heavy armors available in Act 1 especially, and in Act 2 as well, than there are medium armors. So you have more alternative options that are still good to the Adamantine Scale, whereas the Adamantine Splint heavy armor users, this is going to be their best armor throughout all of Act 2, and possibly on into Act 3 if you have multiple characters. So this is a huge bonus to your party if you have any heavy armor character in the game. This is equivalently powerful to the Splint armor, has all the same reasons that it's good, but just it has the slight edge in this list because there's fewer good alternatives. It's especially useful for characters that multiply their HP, the value of their HP in some way, like a character that has Blade Ward or something or Warding Bond on it, or temporary hit points, because the damage reduction works extremely well with those effects to multiply the value of the character's hit points. So any character with other damage reduction, resistances, or effects, the Adamantine Splint is even better for, but just every heavy armor user can use this armor and gain a tremendous benefit from it. Coming in at number 14, the Boots of Speed. The Boots of Speed allow you to spend your bonus action to effectively dash, the same as the dash action. It allows you to double your movement speed that round. Now, the tooltip says that enemies have disadvantage on attacks of opportunity against you, but currently this item is bugged and actually gives you disadvantage on attacks of opportunity. But that doesn't actually affect the power level of this item, which is tremendous. Being able to bonus action dash is the class feature that rogues get at level 2, and this is now available on every single character when you have the Boots of Speed. The Boots of Speed let you move around the battlefield extremely easily. I already talked about why this is so good with the Helmet of Haste, because it lets your melee characters get into range of enemies, so you won't lose turns by being out of position. But it's even better than the Helmet of Haste, because it lasts the entire combat, and lets you move a tremendous distance with your action if you need to. This also stacks with a normal dash, so if you really need to go a large distance in a single turn, like to run away from a combat that's going badly, you can both move, bonus action dash, and with your action, dash again, in order to move 90 feet by default, or even more if you have other boosts your mobility. The Boots of Speed just give you a tremendous amount of agency on the battlefield. You'll always be exactly where you want to be when you have this item equipped, and that means that you're never wasting turns not attacking, and enemies are not reaching you if you don't want them to. It's best, of course, for melee characters, but also for any positioning-dependent character, and this one's even better for archers than other mobility items, because you can constantly move out of range of them, and it's especially good on characters that don't have a particularly impactful bonus action, because it gives them something great to do with their bonus action. Obviously, no synergy with rogues who already get this effect with their bonus action dash, but for any other character, the Boots of Speed are incredible. At number 13, the Adamantine Shield, the third of the Adamantine items. The Adamantine Shield has the same critical hit immunity that the other two Adamantine armors have, and the same reeling effect that means that if enemies attack you, then they will lower their chance of hitting you in future. However, the Adamantine Shield reeling effect takes place on a miss, which is even better for you, because enemies that, when you have this item equipped, you probably have it on a high armor class character, so enemies that miss you are even less likely to hit you in future. You also get the shield bash attack, so if they do hit you, then you have a chance to knock them prone. So whether they miss or hit, they're going to be taking a debilitating effect in return. The Adamantine Shield is amazing. It's the best shield available in Act 1 because the critical hit immunity is so powerful. And for any character that's building high armor class, the reeling effect is very, very good, or other defensively oriented characters. And it's especially good for characters that have shield proficiency, but not medium or heavy armor proficiency, because this can let your entire party become immune to critical hits. Between the Grimskull helmet, the Adamantine Shield, and one of the armors, 3 of your party members can become immune to criticals, and that can vastly reduce the risk that your party is in when you're going through the game. So the Adamantine Shield just gives you a lot more defensive utility and keeps your party alive. Best shield in the game in Act 1, so best in slot for any shield user. At number 12, the Caustic Band. The Caustic Band gives you 2 acid damage on your weapon attacks. So every time you make a weapon attack, you deal an additional 2 acid damage. This works passively. There's no action economy cost, unlike, for example, the Broodmother's Revenge, and it works on any character that's making weapon attacks. Now, 2 flat damage is a worse bonus than a d4 of damage, like the Ring of Flinging, for example, gives you, but still a pretty powerful bonus. And any character that's attacking a lot is going to be using the Caustic Band for a big chunk of the game, because bonus damage from your ring slot is incredible. The Caustic Band increases your average damage of multi-attacking characters in the early game, probably by like 20%, and then in the later game it's going to increase their average damage still by 10% or so, and that's a huge bonus for a single item slot. And when you're attacking a lot in a round, so any character that's making multiple attacks in a round, and therefore applying this additional 2 acid damage consistently, you're getting a ton of bonus damage and killing a lot of enemies a turn sooner than you would otherwise. When you're measuring damage items, you have to look at the likelihood that they cost an enemy an action by killing them a turn sooner than you would otherwise, and the Caustic Band makes that very likely for any character that is attacking multiple times in a turn. So, incredible item. Obviously, items that boost your damage are always going to be interesting. This is one of the earliest ones available. Caustic Band is amazing. At number 11, just shy of the top 10, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. This is one of my very favorite items in the game, and one that many of my build guides recommend, and that many of my party members use consistently. The Disintegrating Nightwalkers give you Misty Step, castable once per short rest, which Misty Step is an invaluable tool in Honor mode. It allows you much, much better positioning across the battlefield, and it's a kind of no questions asked positioning tool. You can always Misty Step to wherever you need to be if you have Misty Step available. So I think that it's more or less mandatory that every character have access to Misty Step, and the Disintegrating Nightwalkers gives that to you. In addition to that extremely powerful positioning tool, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers also make you immune to Enwebbed, Entangled, and Ensnared, and you can't slip on grease or ice surfaces and become prone. Going prone in Baldur's Gate is devastating, because if you fall prone on your own turn, you lose the rest of your turn. And if you fall prone while concentrating on a spell, you lose concentration on that spell. It's one of the house rules that Baldur's Gate changed from tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, and so prone effects are incredibly dangerous in this game. Immunity to them is really, really powerful. This is especially useful if you are making these surfaces yourself. If you're creating grease or especially ice surfaces, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers make you immune to that, and so you can, with impunity, set up ice surfaces on the battlefield, one of the most powerful strategies in Baldur's Gate, and run around on them without falling over and losing your turn. So the Disintegrating Nightwalkers both solve the problems of characters with low mobility, and also give you a very powerful tool to characters that want to use ice surfaces, which are themselves a very powerful tool. So they synergize very well with many different kinds of characters, and it's a rare party that doesn't want these items. They're especially good for low mobility characters or characters without Misty Step. Good for Misty Step is I put here in the good for section, but I mean characters that don't otherwise have access to Misty Step. And for characters that are using ice, whether through the Snowburst Ring to create ice surfaces or casting ice spells themselves, any character that's going to be in their own ice surfaces can benefit tremendously from these boots, making them dangerous to the enemies, but not to themselves. And at number 10, for the top 10 items in Baldur's Gate 3 Act 1, we have the Whispering Promise Ring. The Whispering Promise Ring is a ring that you can get quite early that gives you, whenever you heal a creature, that creature gains 2 turns of Bless. So they gain a plus 1d4 bonus to their attack rolls and saving throws for 2 turns. This is the same effect as the spell Bless and doesn't stack with it, so you won't be able to cast Bless and use the Whispering Promise Ring, but it's free. Anytime you heal a creature, when you have the Whispering Promise equipped, they get 2 turns of Bless. 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saves in the early game is a massive bonus. A character in the early game probably has a plus 5 bonus to their attack rolls, 3 from their attributes and 2 from their proficiency. So you are giving them a 50% increase in their likelihood to hit, or in their bonus to their hit chance, by casting Bless on them. That's a massive bonus, obviously. And so the Whispering Promise has a tremendous effect. Now, it is true that this effect is duplicated by a spell, but being able to get this constantly and for free makes your whole party so much more effective. You can apply this both by actually casting healing spells or using healing effects, but also by having the character throw a potion at the feet of your party. If you throw a potion, it creates an area of effect of healing, and so if you group your party together before combat starts, throw a potion at their feet, you get 2 turns of Bless, and you can start Blessed on the first turn of combat. Characters that have healing over time auras, like Ancients Paladins, can also consistently reapply this, and you can also, because the Whispering Promise does work on the character who has it equipped, if they heal themselves, they gain the Bless, you can just drink a potion to bless yourself. So the Whispering Promise gives you a massive amount of increase to your effectiveness for almost no cost. It doesn't really cost actions to use, it doesn't cost spell slots to use, and it's going to increase the effectiveness of your party dramatically. Any party can benefit from having a character spec'd into healing, using the healing items, like the Whispering Promise, and one that we'll talk about later, and so this is going to be a mainstay of your Act 1 playthroughs, and will stick with you throughout the entire game. It's especially good, of course, for characters that have healing spells, specifically Healing Word and Mass Healing Word, so you can apply this effect as a bonus action, but it's also just good for everyone, because anyone can equip this and throw a potion to buff their whole party. Special mention of the Whispering Promise Ring for parties without Bless themselves, so parties without a cleric or another character that can cast Bless, because then they can't even duplicate this effect with a spell slot. Parties that have it won't necessarily need the Whispering Promise, though they can still benefit from it dramatically, of course. But parties without Bless, this is basically a mandatory item, so definitely keep this one in mind. At number 9, the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring. The Shapeshifter's Boon gives you a plus 1d4 bonus to all of your ability checks, so all of your skill checks that you roll while you are shapeshifted or disguised. It's easy to disguise self permanently. It is a ritual spell, so you can just disguise self for free, and then you can have a bonus with the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring the entire day, as long as your character remains disguised. There's some bugs and various ways that you can get this bonus on your whole party, or get this bonus without having to stay in disguise, but even if you use it without abusing the bugs with this item, just for a plus 1d4 bonus on your skill checks, this is an incredible boon to your party, no pun intended with the name. The Shapeshifter's Boon Ring basically gives you Guidance, which is the best spell in the game, and it stacks with Guidance. So it is going to double your chances of passing skill checks. So for dialogue checks, you will be wildly more effective. For opening locks, you'll be wildly more effective. And it can be used on any party member who's making skill checks, which is pretty much anyone. And of course, especially good if you are running around in disguise all of the time. The only reason it's rated this low, because the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring is incredibly powerful, and so 9th is actually, I think, a little conservative for the rating for it. I imagine some people would have it higher up, is that it doesn't have an effect in combat, except if you're making an athletics check to shove someone. And so the amount of utility that you're going to get for it from your combat is limited to persuasion checks that can prevent combats or lockpicking so you have better gear. So it does make your party much better at doing stuff overall and will make your playthrough much smoother, but it won't by itself win combats for you the way some of the items higher up in this list will. So the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring, tremendous benefit to any party, and definitely worth grabbing. At number 8, the Protecty Sparkswall. The Protecty Sparkswall is a robe, so it's a clothing item, that gives you a +1 bonus to your spell save DC. It also has some effects when you have lightning charges, so if you have other items that give you lightning charges, which you can do with like the water sparkers to generate lightning charges constantly, you get a +1 bonus to your AC and saving throws. Now obviously you are stuck in a robe, so your AC won't be super high regardless. But you can use this alongside the Bracers of Defense or a shield and mage armor to still reach reasonable AC. The real bonus of this item, though, is the +1 bonus to your spell save DC. So despite the name, it should probably be called the Attacky Sparkswall. The Protecty Sparkswall just makes you better at landing your important spells. This is the first item that you'll get that lets you boost your spell save DC in most playthroughs, and that is one of the most powerful things that you can do in Baldur's Gate. If you land your spells, those spells can be command, they can be hypnotic pattern, they can be whatever that just takes enemies out of the fight immediately. So increased chance to do that is one of the most powerful things that an item can give you, and this item is one of the best ones to give that to you right at the beginning. This is going to be the best in slot item for casters throughout Act 1 and through all of Act 2. It's only in Act 3 that casters get a better chest slot item than the Protecty Sparkswall. So this is going to stay with you throughout the vast majority of the game and all of the most important and difficult parts of the game. It's obviously intended for casters, so you won't need it if your party doesn't have any character that needs a spell save DC bonus, and especially good if you're using mage armor because it's a cloth, so it allows you to use mage armor along with it. And I did include a note here that you do not need to be a lightning build in order to benefit from the Protecty Sparkswall. The real benefit's the save DC, which you get regardless of lightning charges, so you definitely do not need to build for lightning. This is just the best in slot caster item for every caster. At number 7, the Boots of Stormy Clamour. The Boots of Stormy Clamour give you, whenever the wearer inflicts a condition on a hostile creature, you also inflict 2 turns of Reverberation. Reverberation stacks up to 5 times, and for each stack, enemies lose 1 of their physical saving throws, so Dexterity, Strength, and Constitution saving throws. So at 4 stacks, they have a -4 penalty to their con saves, and Dex saves, which is pretty dramatic already. And then at 5 stacks, they take damage and have to make a con save or they fall prone. And that's at the penalty that Reverberation is already inflicting. When the wearer inflicts a condition on a hostile creature is one of the easiest conditions in Baldur's Gate 3 to meet, because just about everything in the game counts as a condition. Tons of characters inflict conditions passively with all of their attacks. Any character with a poisoned weapon inflicts a condition whether the poison works or not, because either you inflict the poison condition or the antidote condition, and then the reverberation goes on that enemy. Stacking Reverberation is an extraordinarily powerful strategy which any character can use to knock enemies prone, and it will make that enemy helpless. One reason the Boots of Stormy Clamour aren't in the top 5 or so items, because these are an incredibly powerful item that will stay with you through the entire game and be a mainstay of a large number of builds from beginning of the game to the end of the game, is that they're actually at their weakest in Act 1. It's in Act 2 when you get a lot of the items that let you build into the full Reverberation or Radiating Orb builds, that the Boots of Stormy Clamour really take off. They're already really powerful in Act 1, but it isn't till later in the game that this item becomes as incredible as it will become later on. So the Boots of Stormy Clamour, great item, absolutely worth using in Act 1, but will get even better throughout the game and will remain best in slot for characters that are using them through the entire game. Especially good for a character that's planning to build around Reverberation, but anybody can use it as long as you inflict a condition, which any character can do quite easily. There's lots and lots of ways to passively inflict conditions, and Reverberation is such a powerful effect that it's absolutely worth inflicting on as many enemies as possible, so the Boots of Stormy Clamour will come up in every single playthrough. Coming in at number 6, the Hellrider's Pride. The Hellrider's Pride are a set of gloves that give you, whenever you heal another creature, so this is another one of the buff on heal items that work whenever you heal a creature, although this one doesn't work when you heal yourself, only when you heal an ally. The creature you healed gains Blade Ward for 2 turns, the same as the Blade Ward cantrip. Blade Ward halves bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, all physical damage, including magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. The tooltip here says damage dealt by weapon attacks. That's actually not true. It works on all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, not just that dealt by weapon attacks. It also gives you +1 to strength saving throws, which you can very safely ignore. The Hellrider's Pride is so incredible because taking half damage on basically all of the threatening attacks in the early game is unbelievably strong, and you can get these gloves quite early in the game. So your party can be effectively taking half damage from physical damage very, very early on in the game. That makes your party's hit points stretch dramatically further. It multiplies the effectiveness of some of the other strong items we've seen, like the Adamantine gear that provides damage reduction. And again, just like the Whispering Promise, this is free to apply. All you have to do is heal an ally by throwing a potion at them, by bonus action healing warding them, so it doesn't cost you action economy and gives you a tremendous defensive benefit. Taking half damage, I can't emphasize how good that is, especially on the most common types of damage. It will just make your party so much less likely to die. And so the Hellrider's Pride gives you dramatically increased longevity in fights. Even if fights are going badly, they can keep you alive through even the most difficult or over-leveled encounters. And so the Hellrider's Pride are just, I just can't say enough good things about this item. You might wonder why they rank higher than the Whispering Promise ring. The effect is, I would say, a little bit better on the whole, but mostly it's that it's an effect that you can't easily get from another spell. The Whispering Promise, if you didn't have it, you could duplicate the effect with Bless, and that would be fine. Obviously worse, but definitely fine. The Hellrider's Pride is an almost unique effect. Casting Blade Ward on yourself does not duplicate the effect of this item, and so this item makes your entire party take half damage from everything, which, if you sort of, if you just hear that phrase, you should understand just how good that is. Obviously, it's especially good for healers or characters carrying a lot of potions. It's worth noting that this has special relevance for Berserker Barbarians, because they can bonus action throw a potion at their ally to heal them and apply the buff. And yeah, this is just a great item. Any player who likes to win the video game should equip the Hellrider's Pride and use it. So, given how strong these items have been up to this point, you may be wondering how strong the items are that managed to make it into the top 5. So let's see. With number 5, the Strange Conduit Ring. The Strange Conduit Ring gives you an additional 1d4 psychic damage on all of your weapon attacks whenever you are concentrating on a spell. Concentrating on a spell is basically free. There's a lot of spells that you can concentrate on all day. You can get a cantrip that lets you concentrate on it. You can get an item that lets you cast a concentration spell. So even characters that can't cast spells themselves can very, very easily concentrate on a spell in order to trigger the Strange Conduit Ring. When it's active, you deal an additional d4 psychic damage on every single weapon attack, and psychic damage is a pretty good damage type in Baldur's Gate, because there's ways in the late game to make enemies vulnerable to it, but also just surprisingly few enemies, despite the prevalence of undead and constructs in the game, actually are resistant or immune to psychic damage. So you can do psychic damage to a lot of enemies you think you wouldn't be able to, though not every enemy. The main thing here, though, is just that it's a d4 of extra damage on every single attack. So any character that's attacking multiple times in a turn is going to be doing an average of 2.5 extra damage per attack when they have the Strange Conduit ring. It also uses a ring slot, so you can have it alongside another damage-boosting item, like the Caustic Band, for example, for even more damage output. And it rolls a die when it does this additional damage. It's a d4, so if you critically hit, that gets doubled. So on a critical hit build, the Strange Conduit ring is even more powerful. Any character that's making lots of attacks in a round will increase their damage output enormously by equipping the Strange Conduit ring, and increased damage is one of the best things, of course, that an item can do, because it lets you kill enemies faster. Good for multi-attacking characters specifically, but any character that's making weapon attacks at all will want the Strange Conduit ring, and it will stay best in slot basically throughout the entire game for a lot of characters. Coming in at number 4, the Deathstalker Mantle. The Deathstalker Mantle is a unique item available only to Dark Urge players that allows you to become invisible whenever you kill an enemy. So when you kill an enemy, you get 2 turns of invisibility for free. This triggers off of any time you kill an enemy, though there are a couple effects that don't count as the character themselves killing the enemy, so those won't trigger it. But for the most part, no matter how you kill an enemy, no matter how you deal the damage, you're going to kill them, and then you're going to become invisible. Invisibility is one of the best defensive tools in Baldur's Gate, because very few enemies detect it or can do anything about it, so it makes that character effectively immune to retaliation as long as it's killing stuff. And it also is an extremely potent offensive tool. It lets you position yourself in combat very easily, so you can be in the right place to attack the next enemy that you want. It lets you move aggressively with impunity, because you know you're going to be invisible and you won't be able to be retaliated against. And it gives you advantage on your first attack, because the enemy can't see you. So it's a massive bonus, both to your defensive and offensive capabilities with the Deathstalker Mantle, and it's free. All you have to do is kill an enemy, and any character that wants to use this item is going to be spec'd into killing enemies regularly. There's some boss fights against a single strong enemy where this won't come up, but relatively few in the game where you don't have something that you can kill to trigger the Deathstalker Mantle effect. And this just lets you reposition in combat, stay alive against impossible odds, constantly deal damage, and it's free and passive. It also fills a slot that in Act 1, there's no other cloaks at all in the game. There's no other Act 1 cloaks, so it's filling a slot that otherwise has nothing in it at all. And that it will also take a while to get any other good cloaks, so the Deathstalker Mantle is going to be filling a slot that has no competition for a very long time. For that reason, and because of the incredible power level of this item, it comes in at number 4, obviously only available to Dark Urge characters, but absolutely a worthy draw to playing Dark Urge because this item is so good. Especially important for damage dealers who are likely to get kills. Obviously, this has less effectiveness for support characters who aren't actually themselves killing enemies, or like summoners may not use this as well. But any character that's killing enemies, which is most characters in Dungeons & Dragons, because it's a game that mostly has kill-happy character types, will be able to use the Deathstalker Mantle to maximum effect. Mobile characters also can use it to disengage from combat or reposition somewhere where you need them to be, so lots of synergy with this item, but mostly just the incredible basic power level of the item lets you win combats very easily. And coming in at number 3, in the top 3, drumroll please, we have the Graceful Cloth. The Graceful Cloth is one of the most powerful items in the entire game. So even though it shows up quite late in Act 1, it's still one of the very most important and best items that you can get in Act 1, because it's going to help your Act 1 play, the remainder of Act 1 immensely, and it will be incredible throughout Act 2, and for some characters throughout Act 3. The Graceful Cloth gives you an increase of your dexterity by 2 points, which means you effectively get a free feat from equipping this item, which means that you can spend that feat on something else, like Alert, or another ability score improvement, or Tavern Brawler, or something along those lines, in order to increase the power level of your character massively without spending resources. It lets characters who are heavily multi-classed also still hit 20 dexterity. So if you have only 18 dexterity because you only get 1 feat, and maybe you're using Ethel's Hair and 17 dexterity to hit 18, then the Graceful Cloth to hit 20, and then you can take just Sharpshooter as your only feat for an archer character, the Graceful Cloth will still let you hit 20 dexterity. So it will both power up any character that puts it on, and also allows you to get away with builds you wouldn't be able to do if this item didn't exist. In addition to that, you get 5 feet of additional jump distance, which is really good, especially for dexterity-based characters who have low jump distance, so this gives them a ton of additional mobility, and advantage on all of your dexterity checks. Cat's Grace gives you advantage on your dexterity checks and saving throws, so you are going to have a bonus to your dex saves and make them with advantage, and make all of your lockpicking and stealth checks with advantage. So any character that's making sleight of hand checks or stealth checks benefits from advantage permanently when they're wearing the Graceful Cloth. That means you will never fail to open a lock, basically, and if you're doing any stealth archery shenanigans with greater invisibility, the Graceful Cloth gives you permanent advantage on the stealth checks in order to stay unseen and continue to attack enemies without retaliation. This item increases your initiative as well, and armor class, which is one of the most powerful things that an item can do in Baldur's Gate. Initiative is the best stat in Baldur's Gate, and for that reason, dexterity is the best attribute, and it boosts the best attribute. So it also lets you go before enemies, which is critically important to honor mode. It's one of the few ways to boost your initiative in the early stages, especially in Act 1. And so it just increases the power level of your character, whatever character's wearing it, dramatically. It's good for any character. Anyone can put this on and benefit from it, but especially good for stealth archers, also good for casters and mage armor users, because those characters can wear the Graceful Cloth without sacrificing armor class to gain the bonus initiative and everything. And in fact, improve their armor class because of the bonus dexterity. And for any character that's making sleight of hand and stealth checks, this gives them permanent advantage, so it's even better for them. But overall, this item just provides a tremendous amount of power to your party, no matter who's wearing it, especially good for stealth archers who wear it the entire game, so they can take Sharpshooter while being heavily multi-classed. And at number 2, just shy of the number 1 item slot, the Luminous Armour. The Luminous Armour is another 15 AC medium armor, so obviously you need a character with medium armor proficiency to make use of this item, but as long as you meet that very basic requirement, the Luminous Armour is one of the items in the game that has the absolute most impact on your likelihood to win the game overall. I think this is, in fact, the second best item in the game, second only to the item that it comes in at number 1 here, in terms of increasing your expected win rate in honor mode, because they both appear in Act 1, and the Luminous Armour appears very early in Act 1, so you can use it basically the entire game. Being a 15 AC medium armor was enough to get the +1 breastplate onto this list, or almost onto this list, by itself, and the Luminous Armour does that in addition to a powerful magical effect. So you're not even giving up anything to wear this armor. However, it also has one of the most powerful magical effects in the game in Radiating Shockwave. Whenever you deal radiant damage, which is again a very easy condition to meet, especially if you're a cleric who can put Spirit Guardians on and deal constant radiant damage, but also lots of characters can deal incidental radiant damage, and later in the game you'll get a ring that lets you do radiant damage on every attack. You cause a Radiant Shockwave. Radiant Shockwave applies 2 stacks of Radiating Orb to everything within 10 feet, and Radiating Orb gives enemies a -1 penalty per stack they have on it. So basically, every time you hit an enemy with radiant damage, everything in the AoE gets a -2 penalty on their attack rolls, which stacks up to a maximum of 10. A -10 penalty on enemy attacks means they will never, ever hit you. So this lets you shut down bosses completely, preventing them from ever harming your party. Almost every enemy in Baldur's Gate relies on its attack rolls in order to hurt you, and the Luminous Armour just completely stops that avenue to losing combats. You can stack Radiant Orbs up to 10 almost immediately if your character's spec'd for it, but even if they aren't, and you can only do 1 or 2 instances of radiant damage for a -4 penalty, that's still the enemy making their attacks. That's effectively the same as the enemy making every single attack with disadvantage. It's like roughly mathematically equivalent to that with only a -4 penalty, and it can be more than double that penalty if you continue to stack it. The Luminous Armor's benefit to your party is just never, ever dying. So any party can use this because it stops enemies from doing anything to you as long as you can deal radiant damage to them, which is very, very easy to make happen. Obviously, especially good for the Radiating Orb builds. If you are building around Radiating Orb, this armor is especially good, but you don't have to be doing so in order to make use of it. And of course, clerics make the best use of it, or other characters with Spirit Guardians, because that lets them apply the radiant damage more consistently. But again, you don't have to in order to use this armor. Just wins the game very, very easily. Best in slot for Radiating Orb builds the entire game, and one of the most powerful and most important items in Baldur's Gate 3. And, coming in at number 1, if you've been following this channel for any length of time, this probably will not come as a surprise, because this item gives you everything that is powerful in Baldur's Gate 3. The number 1 equippable item for Act 1, and by extension, the number 1 equippable item in the entire game, the Gloves of Dexterity. The Gloves of Dexterity give you 18 Dexterity, no matter what Dexterity you took on your character sheet. So if you take 8, and equip the Gloves of Dexterity, then that 8 becomes an 18. They also give you +1 bonus to your attack rolls, so you'll be attacking at the same effectiveness as a character that has 20 Dexterity when you have the Gloves of Dex equipped. You will give up a couple of the bonuses that +2 more Dexterity would have given you, like the Initiative and Armor class and the bonus damage if you're making Dexterity-based attacks, but the most important one is the chance to hit, and so this gives that to you already. This item does just about everything broken in Baldur's Gate 3. It lets you ignore stat requirements. Baldur's Gate lets you respec freely, so as soon as you get this item, your character can just drop their dex to 8, and then equip this item for the rest of the game, get all of those attribute points back to put into other attributes, and never have to spend a feat raising their dexterity. That lets them spend those feats on even more powerful things like Alert, Tavern Brawler, like increases to other attribute points that you need more. And so the Gloves of Dexterity free up a ton of resources that you would have to spend in your build otherwise. They're also inherently just very powerful. Even if you equip them on a character that has 14 dex already, a +2 bonus to your Initiative, Armor class, attack rolls, and damage on a Dexterity-based attacker is a massive bonus already, and the Gloves of Dexterity let you do that without having to invest any resources into their use at all, just your glove slot. The amount of free value that you get from this item, I cannot overstate how good this is. I think this is the number 1 item in terms of increasing your win rate, because it just gives you so much for the price of a single gear slot, multiple feats, huge piles of attribute points, and will allow you to just make a ton of characters more powerful. It's both excellent for any build. Any build can equip this and get stronger, except for ones that already want to hit 20 dexterity. But also enables a whole raft of builds that couldn't exist without this item, because they would just simply not meet the stat requirements. And so this item allows you to just build a ton of characters that wouldn't be viable at all if it didn't exist. Good for any character that wants Armor class and Initiative, which is shockingly all of them. Especially good for multi-class characters who can use this to multi-class effectively without sacrificing too many feats, because you get all your feats for free by using the Gloves of Dexterity. Special mention as well for monks and paladins who are highly multi-attribute dependent, or MAD. And because those characters really need a lot of different attributes high, the Gloves of Dexterity totally solves that problem. A paladin with these equipped can drop their dexterity to 8 and still have high armor class and initiative, and therefore get their high strength, charisma, constitution, and wisdom that those characters need without having to sacrifice in any of those areas, because the Gloves of Dexterity just fully solve the paladin's multi-attribute dependency. It's a little more complicated for monks because there's other gloves that monks might want, but for monks as well, this is a massive bonus and lets you put all of your points into wisdom for even more armor class, for example, and just solves all of the problems that those builds would have immediately. The Gloves of Dexterity, I don't even know what to say about this item that I haven't sort of hashed over in hundreds of build guides and just how good dexterity is. I think it is worth noting that dexterity is the best attribute by far because of how much it gives you, and this gives you a bunch of dexterity for free. And so the Gloves of Dexterity are not an instant win button, but definitely bring you a long, long way towards victory simply by existing in the game. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the top 20 items in Baldur's Gate 3 for Act 1. I will be back with Act 2 and Act 3, so definitely look forward to that. And of course, if you think there's an item that I missed or placed wrongly in this list, then definitely do let me know in the comments. As always, I'm very open to moving things around if you have a good argument, or if you think there's an item I completely overlooked that deserves a place in this list, or one that is on this list that you think is less powerful than I believe it to be, then definitely let me know, and I'm open to moving things if you have a good argument for doing so. Of course, if you want to hear more about these items, or about any of the items that aren't on this list, go check out my tier lists. I will link the playlist. I did, thanks to popular demand, put all of my tier lists into one playlist, so you can now go find that. And I'll link that in the description, so you can go check that out if you have questions about any of the other items in Baldur's Gate 3. Then I've done a tier list for all of them. As always, my friends, if you have enjoyed the video, please feel free, of course, to hit like or leave a comment, because interaction with the video helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 guides and other strategy game analysis. And if you've really enjoyed the video, then consider donating using the join or super thanks buttons below. Thank you so much for watching, my friends, and I'll catch you next time.